What really happened with your host, Mike Rivero. You're listening to the Republic Broadcasting Network, where you'll find out what the Fukushima's going on.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It is Monday, May 7th, 2018, start of a brand new week. And we have got a lot of stuff to talk about. There's a lot going on. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. And we're going to start with what, for Claire and I, is local news, and that is, of course, pardon me, the ongoing eruption down on the Big Island. This is certainly the largest eruption that's occurred while Claire and I have lived here. And it's causing a lot of destruction, and it looks like it's going to get a lot worse. There are 10 active fissures or vents right now. One is still up near the crater of Kilauea. The others are all down in the Leilani Estates area, which is kind of a high-end, nice house area. And something like 31 homes have been damaged or destroyed outright. And there really is nothing they can do about it. It's just the volcano is going to do what the volcano is going to do. And the people have been evacuated. Some have been allowed back in to recover some more possessions from their homes. And of course, the real tragedy is that on that part of the Big Island, you simply cannot get volcano insurance. It's like living in a floodplain, trying to buy flood insurance, or living in Southern California, trying to buy quake insurance. The insurance companies will be happy to sell you flood, quake, and volcano insurance as long as you don't live anywhere near where those events might actually happen. Now, a lot of people have sent me emails expressing their concerns about Claire and I want to reiterate, Claire and I live on a different island. All of this volcano erupting is taking part on the south flank of the Big Island, which is the island of Hawaii, not to be confused with the name of the entire state. And right now, the trade winds are continuing to blow the volcanic gases off to the southwest, and we're located northwest of the Big Island, so we're not having to deal with that yet. Could definitely change here. So they're saying it's no sign of slowing. This could go on for weeks or even months. Now, I was looking at the tilt meter data over at the the U.S. Geological Survey, and while there is still deformation taking place, it's not accelerating the way it was before. But there is still that concern that on top of having to deal with the lava and the constant quakes, which are continuing, and the toxic gases, that any kind of a large land movement, either above or underneath the ocean surface, could trigger a tsunami. And again, Claire and I live 440 feet up over Pearl Harbor, so we're not going to be hurt. But if there is a tsunami, it could cause a lot of damage. There was a big earthquake back in 1975, generated a major tsunami, caused a lot of damage, even out in California. So it is a very real possibility that we all have to be aware of. And Claire and I have taken our precautions. We have flashlights and shoes by the side of our bed. We actually have a quake alarm. And we didn't feel that big 6.91, which was kind of unusual. Well, we were in a car at the time, but we talked to a lot of people who said they didn't feel it. Now, there was that other quake, it was about a 6.4 a few years back that really rocked us around, blacked out the island of Oahu. And but it may just be that chamber of magma sitting between the quake zones and Oahu is a poor conductor of seismic energy, and that may be the reason. But I did set up my little improvised seismograph over the weekend, and I'm able to detect the quakes on the Big Island. The data is obviously not all that useful. It was just an exercise to see if I could. So that's where we are right now. One of the areas of concern, of course, has to do with the Puna geothermal venture. And this is a geothermal power plant. Obviously, with all this volcanic energy, there have been efforts over the years to try and find ways to tap it. And there's one working system that is down there. They've gone through an emergency shutdown and evacuated. But the concern is there are 50,000 gallons of pentane stored at the site, which if The lava gets into that, sets it on fire. That's just going to add to the woes of the people on the Big Island. So we're watching the videos and the photos, and it really is very sad to see it happening. Okay, now then, Rudy Giuliani is out there, was giving a speech at this anti-Iran conference, and he went on out and said that Trump will kill the Iran nuclear deal. And during this morning's White House press conference, it was announced Trump will reveal his decision tomorrow. He's not going to wait for the 12th, and he may be rushing this along to get something going with Iran because his good friend, Bibi Netanyahu, is facing indictment for bribery and corruption and a bunch of other issues. And nothing is going to distract the public away from how corrupt rulers are than a nice, bloody war. So we're going to do a shout out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. Now, pardon me, the chairman of the House Armed Services Committee has warned Trump against leaving the Iran deal. Everybody wants this deal to remain in place. The other signers of the P5+1 want it to remain in place. Polls are showing the majority of the American people want it in place. And everybody is concerned about what are going to be the repercussions. Iran is out there saying there will be historic regret if the U.S. pulls out of the JCPOA, P5+1 deal. Now, France, Great Britain, and Germany have said they will stick to the Iran deal regardless of Trump's decision. They're not going to drop the deal. And earlier, Iran had basically come on out and said, well, if the U.S. pulls out, there is no more deal. They've now reversed that decision. And President Rouhani is saying that Iran will stick to the nuclear deal even if America pulls out, as long as the European Union guarantees its commitment. Now, what they're signaling here is actually very subtle. If the U.S. pulls out of the deal, they're going to throw more sanctions on top of Iran to try and get Iran's long-range ballistic missiles destroyed so that Iran is easier to conquer. But what Iran is signaling is that they're not all that concerned about doing business with the United States because they're going to do all their business with Europe. They're going to sell their oil to Europe, and they're going to get along just fine with that. Now, Boris Johnson flew to Washington, D.C. As part of the ongoing European diplomatic effort to stop Donald Trump from pulling out of the Iran nuclear deal. And basically is joining the chorus of voices saying this could lead to a regional war. And over in France, Emmanuel Macron is saying exactly the same thing. A U.S. exit from the Iran nuclear deal might mean war. In fact, he's calling the U.S. Terminating the deal as opening Pandora's box. Now, over in Tehran, their national security chief is out there saying something that does need to be said. And that is, who can trust the United States if Trump can just kill his predecessor's deals? And that is a valid point here, because every time the U.S. flips on a treaty or an agreement, the rest of the world loses more trust that the word of the U.S. government can be taken. And as more and more of this goes on, we're seeing other countries just start to disengage politically from the United States. It's a fool's errand to negotiate a deal with the United States. And of course, the United States government's response to that is to just go back to more strong-arm tactics, do what we tell you to do, or something bad will happen to you. It's a nice country you got there. It'd be a shame if anything happened to it. So everybody's out there. Most of the world wants peace. Netanyahu is already out there banging the drums of war, saying it's better to deal with Iran sooner than later. And then he goes back to that old thing about, oh, if you'd only stopped Germany sooner, we wouldn't have had all those poor Jews sent to the gas chambers. So he's back to playing that card again. Israel will not be happy until the U.S. makes war on Iran for Israel. Israel's pushing all of this stuff here. And there's an interesting little article over here at Mint Press News pointing on out, Trump and Netanyahu keep taking shots at the Iran deal while the rest of the world shakes its head. it really is just these two countries. The United States and Israel want the deal ended so they can open the door back to aggressions against Iran. Now, Saudi Arabia is a player in this, and their motivation is a little bit more subtle. Saudi Arabia, as you know, is in serious economic trouble. They were put into this economic trouble during this poorly thought out oil price war against Russia. And Saudi Arabia got damaged. They had to issue government bonds for the first time in decades. And right now, looking at their budget, they need oil to go above $88 per barrel just to balance their budget and fix what's wrong with their country. And that's their motivation. A war against Iran, or even just the ending of the P5+1 deal and sanctions on Iran's oil will result in shortages here in the United States of America and drive the oil prices up. And as a matter of fact, U.S. oil went above $70 for the first time since 2014. And what that means is when you go to the gas station, the gas prices will be higher. When you go to the supermarket, any food that's brought in on trucks or ships or aircraft will be more expensive. That's just the way these things work. Plastics are going to be more expensive. Story coming out of Zero Hedge. Apparently, Donald Trump is very angry with Obama's Secretary of State John Kerry and a group of his former State Department officials because apparently they have been conducting, shall we say, unofficial diplomacy in recent weeks, sneaking around the world trying to salvage the Iran nuclear deal he presided over ahead of the May 12th renewal deadline. That may be another reason why Trump is moving up the announcement to tomorrow. And Donald Trump got on John Kerry's case for doing that. Now, obviously, I prefer the U.S. remain in the Iran deal and stop wasting all of our money making war on countries that haven't actually done anything wrong to us. But technically, Kerry has violated the Logan Act. And so Trump has a legitimate reason to be a little bit upset. Of course, there's a lot of people who are out there making deals around Trump. All right, so let's turn to the war zones. The Syrian army has delivered a devastating blow to ISIS in southern Damascus, and apparently ISIS defenses are rapidly collapsing under pressure from the Syrian Arab army. Government forces liberated the southern part of the Al-Hajar al-Aswad district from ISIS terrorists and made important gains in the northern part of the district. And ISIS is now trying to propagandize all this, where they're now beheading captured Syrian Arab army members, which is, of course, a war crime here. The electromagnetic fight continues over Syria, and the AC-130 gunships are being jammed, and they're trying to adopt procedures where they can counter this. And the spin being put on this article is that because of the Russian jamming, that's the reason why the U.S. is killing civilians inside Syria. They're trying to put the blame. If you wouldn't jam us, we wouldn't kill any civilians. Well, the U.S. has been killing civilians in Syria for 8 years now. And when they go after a legitimate target, any civilians standing near to it do get hit. But they're trying to basically put the blame on Russia for daring to jam those AC-130 gunships. Now, little point everybody needs to remember, Russia is in Syria at the express request of the Syrian government and with their permission. The U.S. is not. The U.S. has absolutely no business being in Syria. There's been no congressional declaration of war. There's no UN Security Council resolution. The U.S. has just set up shop in somebody else's country. And even when they do have those gunships operating fine, perfect, they still keep missing ISIS and accidentally blowing up civilian infrastructure. You know, those American pilots, they got lousy eyesight here. And that's, you know, it was a heck of a strike, but too bad it was a hospital. That kind of a thing. Okay. All right. Now, over in Israel, Energy Minister and Cabinet Member Yuval Steinitz was interviewed by Ynet, saying if Syrian President Bashar Assad continues allowing the Iranians to operate out of Syria, it would be the end of him, the end of his regime. And again, that is not really up to Israel. Syria should be run by the legitimate Syrian government, and the Syrian government wants these forces there, because it wasn't until Russian support came on in that Assad was actually able to fight back against all these US-backed rebel groups. But everybody is talking real tough here. There was an article that came out over the weekend where Israel is expecting Iran to launch a missile attack at them. In other words, they're telegraphing another false flag. And Israel saying that Iran is going to carry out a revenge attack for Israel's airstrike on the T4 air base. So they're trying to get this thing going just as quickly as they can, because they know global sentiment is rapidly building against all of these US and Israeli wars. The people have had enough. We've had 18 going on 19 years of war, and everybody's sick and tired of it. We're sick and tired of the financial costs. We're sick and tired of watching our nation just decay before our very eyes because all of the money is going to the war machine. We're sick and tired of seeing our young people come back from the war zones in wheelchairs or cheap metal boxes. We're a war-weary people. And the vast majority of Americans understand there is nothing honorable or just or moral or right about these wars. They are flat-out wars of colonialism, imperium, if you will. It's all driven by money and oil. So they may be thinking about just getting this thing going real quick before any more public resistance to wars can get started. Now, France has softened their tone regarding Syria. For a while there, they were out there saying that there will never be a resolution in Syria unless Assad resigns. France has now backed off of that and said, well, really, we're just there to fight ISIS and Al-Qaeda, and so it really isn't up to us. It's up to the Syrian people whether Assad stays in power or not. Meanwhile, the Iraq Air Force is now attacking ISIL targets in Syria, figuring that ISIL, whatever they call themselves this week, still represents a security threat to Iraq. Now, over in Yemen, a Saudi-led attack has hit the Houthi-held presidential palace in the city of Sana'a. And they killed at least 6 people, and just, again, they're just carrying out this attack on Yemen to try and get the people of Yemen to surrender to having a colonial rule. That's what it's really all about, whether you call it a junta or a U.S. puppet or whatever. It still amounts to the reemergence of colonial rule. And the reemergence of colonial rule is basically an admission, if you will, that the colonial powers don't really have a functioning economy any longer. They can't do trade with these other countries, so they'll just conquer them and loot them. That's the thinking. Now, 2 journalists over in Syria have filed federal court cases in the United States to challenge their inclusion on a classified U.S. drone kill list. And this is Bilal Abdel Karim, who's an American citizen and journalist working in Syria. And he escaped being killed by drone strikes on 5 occasions, including 2 strikes on cars he was traveling in. 2 additional strikes were executed on his independent news agency. All right, we're going to take a break here for commercials, and we will be right back with more about the war zones and everything else. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here, and we're talking about this lawsuit that has been filed in federal court by 2 journalists who discovered they're on a U.S. drone strike kill list. We were talking about the first one, Bilal Abdul Karim, several attempts on him. The second one is Ahmad Zaidan, who's a senior reporter with Al Jazeera. And basically, the U.S. is starting to do the same thing Israel's doing in Gaza. Target the journalists. Cut off the flow of information coming from the war zones. Now, down in Israel, the Great March is still going on, leading up to the Nakba, and Israel is still continuing to use exploding ammunition or expanding ammunition, and Gaza's hospitals have been pushed to the brink of collapse. They're running out of supplies. They don't know how to deal with all the wounded. Israel will not allow any of the patients to be evacuated to Palestinian hospitals over in the West Bank. And again, Israel is out there trying to claim that international law and human rights should not be allowed to apply to this war on the border with Gaza. Well, it's not a war. It's a massacre. That's what's going on. The Palestinians are out there marching with flags and banners and music, and they're just being gunned down. Now, the Palestinians have scored one small victory. Apparently, Israel was sending drones over their heads, and apparently the Palestinians managed to shoot one down with a rock and a slingshot. Talk about your David and Goliath moment right there. So, obviously, the Palestinians have just reached the point where they're unwilling to accept living in the world's largest outdoor prison any longer. And Israel is out there basically pulling in every chip they have to make sure that the corporate media around the world pays no notice whatsoever. Now, over in Lebanon, there's been a bit of an upset. The unofficial results of the election over there. The first election in 9 years, Lebanon has been under the control of the Western Bank coalition led by Hariri. And the results of the election that was held, basically Hezbollah and their political allies look to have won a majority of the seats in parliament. And that means Hariri is going to be out of a job, and I'm sure that Israel is going to be very angry about that, because Hezbollah is now the legitimate government of a sovereign nation. And that's going to make it a little bit harder for Israel to justify going on in and picking away at Hezbollah. Meanwhile, down in Turkey, Turkey is starting to make sounds they may pull out of NATO because the U.S. is threatening to block the sale of 116 F-35s to Turkey, apparently in retaliation for Turkey having purchased Russia's S-400 air defense system. So that's straining there as well. Over in Russia, Vladimir Putin has been inaugurated into his fourth term. And already the corporate media is out there saying, oh, it's a disaster for Russia. It's a disaster. There are protests. And from where I sit, it looks like the U.S. is already trying to whip up a destabilization campaign, like they've done in all these other countries that they want a regime change here. Now, the U.S. Navy has decided to reactivate the Second Fleet, which would be stationed in the North Atlantic in response to Russian aggression in the North Atlantic. Russia isn't aggressing anybody. They're sailing their ships in international waters, but apparently the Pentagon has decided they need to reestablish the Second Fleet. It means, you know, lots of money. We got to buy ships, got to buy airplanes. Trump has announced that a time and place has been set for the planned U.S.-North Korea summit. They haven't exactly said where and when, just that it has been established. And North Korea is out there saying that the U.S. is trying to ruin the mood of détente ahead of the summit with all of Trump's tough talking. And one of the things North Korea is very upset about is Trump's attempting to claim that pressure from his administration is the reason why North Korea is now talking about denuclearization. And North Korea has pointed on out that Trump had nothing to do with it. The pressure to consider denuclearization is coming from China, who is North Korea's main trading partner. So apparently China called up Kim Jong-un and said, it's time to tone this down before we do have a nuclear war on the Korean Peninsula. And the radiation from that, of course, will drift over Chinese territory. So let's go back to just doing business. Let's just, do some economic here. Peace through trade, peace through commerce here. Now, here's where it gets a little scary. And we're going to have to take another break for commercials. And when we come on back, a follow-up on Korea. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're still talking about what's going on over in Korea. And a time and place has been set for the meeting between Trump and Kim Jong-un. Nobody's saying where or when just yet. North Korea is upset, saying that the U.S., with Trump's tweets and statements, is trying to ruin the spirit of détente. And here's where it gets a little bit weird. Over at the United Nations, Nikki Haley is saying that the U.S. will not rule out starting a war with North Korea even before Trump and Kim Jong-un get together. And in an interview on CBS News Sunday morning, Haley was out there saying, no one wants war, the president doesn't want war, I don't want war, no one wants war, but it's an option. Well, supposedly for all these people not wanting war, the U.S. does seem to be in quite a number of them. At least 7 officially acknowledged military actions in other people's countries. And we know from what happened down in Niger that there are probably military, U.S. military in other countries that is still being withheld from the American people. So let's turn to the domestic politics here. And let me take a look at this here. Story that came on out from Zero Hedge. The Mueller investigation is in jeopardy because all of the accusations of it being a witch hunt are starting to play out in the courts. And all of a sudden we're starting to see these judges who are standing up and saying, you've got nothing. You have no evidence. And of course we had Senior Federal Judge T.S. Ellis basically lambaste the Mueller people for what they were doing. And he has demanded the unredacted scope memo written by Rod Rosenstein to verify for himself if Mueller did in fact exceed his mandate. Now, his original mandate was to find some evidence that Trump and Russia colluded during the 2016 campaign. The only evidence of collusion they found was the Hillary Clinton campaign paying Russian nationals for information to put in that dodgy dossier. That's the only collusion that they found. So Ellis is threatening to just throw out all of the charges against Paul Manafort and Mike Flynn. Now, Judge Ellis is on target. The Rosenstein scope memo, written years after Manafort raid to justify Mueller's jurisdiction, shows the Department of Justice and Mueller willing to throw the rule of law out the window to get President Donald Trump. Now, Devin Nunes is out there threatening to hold Jeff Sessions in contempt of Congress. There's been massive stonewalling all during these congressional investigations into the Clinton Foundation, into the email server, into the investigation into the email server, and continuously Department of Justice and FBI say, no, we're going to ignore you. And so now Congress is saying it's time for contempt of Congress charges. Now, it's a black mark on a resume, but it's better than nothing. And Freedom Caucus Chairman Mark Meadows is saying Nunes is absolutely right. It's time for a lot of the officials at the Department of Justice to be held in contempt of Congress. Now, apparently, this coming Inspector General report will confirm that former FBI Director James Comey leaked and lied repeatedly. The whole system is just crooked and corrupt. That's the reality here. And I think evidence that nothing has changed has come out of this other story where the FBI is now refusing to pursue the Strzok page texts. And Grassley has just gone ballistic over this. Again, more stonewalling. Now, a Boston criminal defense attorney, Harvey Silverglate, in an interview with Big League Politics, says that his knowledge of Mueller goes back to many years ago when Mueller helped frame an innocent man for murdering his family. And this was in the case of Jeffrey McDonald. It was a very famous case, you might remember it. And he was a Fort Bragg Army doctor convicted for the murder of his wife and children in 1970. McDonald was convicted in 1979. Most people say they don't think he did it, and he has to this day maintained his innocence. And apparently, what Silverglade says about Mueller was that he was trying to cover up possible exculpatory information. Now, some of the insiders on this case are pointing to the fact that during the Vietnam War, there was a major, major drug problem throughout the entire military. It's even been featured in movies like Full Metal Jacket. And maybe this army doctor was involved, or maybe he just knew too much. But the CIA, during Vietnam, the CIA was bringing heroin into the United States of America as a means of off-the-book funding. And maybe that's why this army doctor got sent away. Now, let me take a quick look at this. This just came on in. All right, CNN is now reporting that Trump is suggesting legal action coming against Mueller's team. So the lawsuits are going to start flying, and apparently the issue that Trump and his lawyers are bringing up are the many obvious conflicts of interest within the anti-Trumpers, which should have resulted in their recusing themselves from the investigation or the persecution, depending upon your point of view. So let's talk about Gina Haspel. A lot of people are very concerned that she not be put in permanent charge of the Central Intelligence Agency because of her long history of being involved with CIA torture centers around the world, including Abu Ghraib and including one that was in Thailand. And a lot of people say that's the wrong message to send to the rest of the world. Now, apparently Friday, the Trump team, apparently they haven't been doing their homework. And as some of this information began to circulate on social media and eventually the corporate media, they called Gina Haspel in last Friday to talk to her and say, what's happening here? Did you really do all this stuff? What's your story or explanation? And apparently at one point somebody suggested, well, it wasn't Gina Haspel's job to determine whether this was moral or immoral, which is a very flimsy excuse. But apparently at one point, Gina Haspel, who is very, very worried about what she's going to be asked during the Senate confirmation hearings next week, wanted to withdraw her nomination. Apparently she wants, I want out. I've been head of the CIA for a week. That's enough for the resume. And apparently, for whatever reason, Trump has said, no, we're going to keep moving forward on this. And so Trump took to Twitter, defending Gina Haspel as the most qualified person to lead the CIA, which triggered a Twitter firestorm, basically saying that no, with all the human rights violations during her tenure as the deputy director of the CIA, this is not a good person to put on in. Now, over at the White House press room, Sarah Sanders came on out and said, well, you Democrats who support women's empowerment should also support Gina Haspel's nomination to the CIA. That triggered a backlash where people said, this has nothing to do with gender or equality or politics. The woman is basically a torturer. And I'm hearing there are even people inside CIA itself who do not want her there because they think it tarnishes the public image of the CIA. Not that the public image of the CIA is all that good right now, but this would just definitely make it worse. Now, a lot of people have been wondering, why is Trump picking certain people who don't seem to be in line with his stated agenda during the campaign? And apparently, there is this Sean M. Bigley, who is a lawyer specializing in security clearances, And he's out there saying that what's going on is the deep state is weaponizing the vetting process so that any appointees by Donald Trump they don't like, they will simply finagle a way to deny them the required security clearances to do their job. That's what's going on. I'm afraid right now the swamp is winning. Now, apparently Democratic Congressman Cardenas is facing sex abuse allegations, and House Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi is calling for a prompt investigation by the Ethics Committee into sexual abuse allegations against Congressman Tony Cardenas. And he's accused of drugging and fondling a teenage girl at a 2007 golf tournament. Now, the congressman is denying the allegations and asking people to withhold judgment. And Pelosi said Cardenas told her he will cooperate with the investigation. Now, apparently this was all triggered because a lawsuit was filed against him on behalf of an unnamed woman. And the suit claims Cardenas gave her a peculiar tasting cup of water while they were playing golf, and she was 16 years old. She says she came down ill, and when he was driving her to the hospital, he fondled her. Now, maybe, maybe not. One of the things that we need to be on guard against is everyone getting caught up in the Me Too hysteria, because we've been through this before back in the 1990s when militant feminism was on the rise, all men are rapists and that's all they are, that kind of mindset, where the ticket to instant media stardom was a spectacular story of rape. And it got so out of hand that ultimately there were all kinds of civil rights lawsuits. And in the end, it actually harmed real rape victims because the police were much less willing to take their stories at face value because of I'm sorry, I'm trying to do too many things at one time. We know that sometimes women do lie about these things. They want a revenge. They want their 15 minutes of fame. So we have to be careful with this. And I'm not saying that I know for any hard fact whether he did it or not. I'm just saying we have to be careful because we know there is so much mendacity in our society as a whole. It seems like we've evolved to a civilization where truth is not seen as necessarily important. Now then, Dinesh D'Souza got a felony conviction for illegal campaign donations, and people are asking if Rosie O'Donnell will get the same treatment, because as it turns out, Rosie O'Donnell has been caught using 5 addresses and 4 names in order to over-donate to Democrats. Now, over at the Clinton Foundation, they are so desperate for donations, they are holding a raffle. And the winning donor gets a trip to New York City to meet Bill, Hillary, and Chelsea. I don't know about you, I'm completely uninterested in meeting any of them. In fact, the further away they are from me, the happier I will be. Meanwhile, Hillary's public image is really taking a beating. According to a new Wall Street Journal NBC poll, Clinton's favorability rating is grim. It's worse than when she lost in 2016. She's at an abysmal -25. And that is pretty bad. Now, over at the New York Post, they have a well-thought-out article, and they're talking about 2016 and the election. And they're trying to counter this talking point that we get from the deep state, especially from the liberals, that the 2016 election was a fluke. Shouldn't have happened. We don't know what happened. We know that the corporate media likes to portray people who voted for Trump as unsophisticated morons. And the point of this article is saying, no, you really need to go on back and study carefully the phenomenon that put Trump in the White House. Because he was not the cause of that movement. He was basically the result of it. And I remember back during 2016, everybody was fed up with government as usual, business as usual. We were fed up with the Clinton crime families' crimes, the Bush crime families' crimes, and the frustration that none of these people committing these egregious acts were ever held to account. And we were looking for somebody new, somebody from outside, and that's where Trump got his support. One of the big shocks was how people in the Rust Belt who'd voted for Obama all of a sudden switched to Trump, maybe because Obama had been a huge disappointment. But I think the results of the 2016 election are more an indicator of what the American people are thinking about our government and our political system than our lack of education and sophistication. Okay, well, let's talk about the economic news here. The stock market, the Dow, did really well. Then there was a real dip that took it almost down to zero gain, and then at the last section, it pushed back up a little bit. So to me, that looks like plunge protection team. But there's an article over at Investment Watch blog, why a strong U.S. dollar could bring the next financial crisis. Because a strong dollar could lead to the Federal Reserve getting into a hyperinflationary cycle. It's all very fragile right now. It's all illusion, smoke and mirrors. There's no real value to the dollar anymore. It's just ink and paper. More and more people are beginning to realize that. Out in Colorado, they're getting into a housing crisis. The people of Colorado don't have jobs. They're getting behind on their mortgages. And there are so many evictions going on right now that the Colorado eviction courts are completely overwhelmed. They can't handle the volume of cases. And what that tells us is consumers in Colorado appear to be tapped out. And that's true for pretty much the entire country. Consumer spending only rose 1.1% in the first quarter. And I think more and more of that is just people needing to replace appliances and other things that are wearing out because they're not built to last very long. All right, we're going to take another break for commercials, and we'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. We're going to take a few phone calls, starting with Frank in North Carolina. Aloha, Frank. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, thanks. What's on my mind is I just saw a report probably in the past 3 weeks on my local little, $20 antenna TV news, local news, and they did a little report that evictions here where I am in Charlotte, North Carolina, are at a 10-year high. So I don't know if I ever mentioned that to you before in the past few weeks, but anyway, there you go.
Yeah, it's pretty bad all over. You know, a lot of people got suckered into what were called interest-only mortgages, where they're never paying down the principal. They just agree to pay the interest month to month. They can't even keep up with that now.
That's all I got. Thanks.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to switch over to Mark in North Carolina. Aloha, Mark. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
But that Frank that all the time Alex Jones asks, "Need you help, Frank?" Anyway, I just want to say, well, I just got a question about that, about the evictions. Are you talking about evictions for not paying rent or actual foreclosure in the home? And then I got something else to say about.
Well, I imagine it's a combination of both. But it's basically painting a picture. This nation has bankrupted itself with the war agenda. There's nothing left out here. And if you go back to General Wesley Clark's original revelation of the agenda, it's already gone on 10 years past its original intended date, and it's still far from complete. We're stuck in all these quagmires where we can't pull on out, and this is pretty much what collapsed the former Soviet Union, was just way too much spending on war and not enough on the people.
Well, you know what they say about Afghanistan, the place where empire goes to die, right? So,
yes.
I mean, that's been pretty historical. But anyway, about Gina, me and Gina there,
yep.
that, I don't know if you probably did, being that you connected with her. you used to be connected with Hollywood, and you know, you seem pretty up on things like that. I don't know if you remember the movie. Boys, it was not only a movie, it was a great book also. Boys from Brazil.
Oh yes.
And this woman, remember this woman she was the one who actually, you know, gave away the facts about the Doberman, where she got the Doberman from a correctional officer in Pennsylvania, Henry Willock. He's the one who gave it that Doberman, Shotzi. And then she said, I have pretty good memory for those things. It was a great movie and a great book too. And she turned out the woman's last name was Ryan. I think it was Helga Ryan or something. And it was based on a true story. She had some kind of a position in the concentration camp, and was, you know, not only accused of severe brutality, but even though she had become an American citizen, she married a guy that had been a soldier at the time, an American soldier, by the name of Ryan. She was actually extradited back to Germany and was in prison, okay, for what she did. So there's no excuse. This woman, Haskell, is in the top of her, you know, is at the head of the CIA. There's no excuse for just following orders. There's no excuse at all.
No, there isn't. There isn't. That came out of Nuremberg. Mark, stay on the line. We got to do a station identification. I'm going to come right back to you after these words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 2. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. And right now we're talking with Mark in North Carolina, who was responding to this idea that Gina Haspel should be given a clean slate on the fact that she ran the CIA's torture program by saying it wasn't really her job to decide whether this was legal, moral, or ethical. That flies right in the face of the Nuremberg Principles, which established that just saying that you are only following your orders was not an excuse for war crimes. And that's actually written into the Uniform Code of Military Justice. I don't know what the equivalent would be for civilian agencies like the Central Intelligence Agency. But for her to just sit there and do what she did, I don't agree that just following her orders gets her off the hook. She ran a torture center.
And, you know, a lot of people don't seem to understand about, you know, a lot of the tortures that took place there, including the one that took place at, you know, that we're had all the, you know, sex, you know, like sex thing with whips and chains and all that.
Yes.
These were not terrorists. These were not suspected terrorists. These were basically POWs, Iraqi war POWs that were captured on the battlefield. So, you know,
some were.
You know,
some were. In a lot of cases, the U.S. in Iraq set up a bounty system where Iraqis could come on in and say, I think this guy over here is working with Al-Qaeda, that he may have knowledge of the weapons of mass destruction. And of course, a lot of people turned other people in for the money, if not for revenge. I mean, if you've got a business competitor, what better way to get rid of him than tell the U.S. that, you know, he's a terrorist sympathizer and get him tortured and shipped off?
Right, Abu Ghraib, that's the place I was thinking about.
Yes.
Yeah, you're right, but there were a lot of them were actually POW, and at the same time, even if they might have had knowledge of those weapons of mass destruction, of course, it didn't even exist, but even if they did, that's no reason for torture. I mean, this doesn't make them terrorists. It just say maybe they were knowledgeable about something and they didn't want to say anything. So this woman belongs in jail. She does not belong in the head of the CIA. She shouldn't be collecting the taxpayer checks either. Like I said, making comparisons, not only boys from Brazil. I mean, these are historical facts. Men and women were, you know, they just following orders, and it wasn't just, you know, it wasn't just a very higher ups either. It was people that were, you know, basically maybe low-level officers and even enlisted men.
Yes.
So this is not an excuse. You know what I mean? It's not at all an excuse. And I just don't understand. I don't understand where this country's coming from anymore, Mike. I really don't. I don't understand the logic anymore, really, because there just is no logic. And most of these things, like 9/11, was a false flag anyway. It was done by the United States, Israel, and Saudi Arabia. I believe they co-opted together and pulled it off. And that it just goes on and on with this stuff. I don't know where we're going, Mike. I tell you the truth, I'm really concerned for this country. I think we're losing our soul. What you see what's going on in Syria now is a crime against humanity also. There is just, and, you know, most of the news networks just ignore it. So does mainstream talk radio, just ignores it.
Yes.
Or they go and say how terrible Assad is. Assad is not terrible at all. Assad is a patriot trying to defend his country against the most vicious terrorist one could imagine. And in this country, I shouldn't say this country because but I mean this government, at least elements of this, are supporting these terrorists, and they know fully well that those terrorists. They can't fool anybody and say they don't know. You know, I know nothing. No, that doesn't wash. It didn't wash in World War II, and it doesn't wash now.
No, it doesn't. It really doesn't. And I know that Haspel thinks that torture is okay, and apparently Trump does too. But anybody who knows about the realities of interrogation are going to tell you torture does not produce reliable intelligence. What's going to happen is the person being tortured is just going to say whatever they think will make the pain stop. Again, the intelligence that came out of the torture program was pretty much useless. The only time it was ever actually used was to put the U.S. nation on, you know, that little colored terror scale that we had, you know, green, yellow, red, peach, soap, and mauve, and plaid at the very top. And there were a lot of those false alarms that were based on information that was just screamed out by these people being tortured just to stop the pain. Now, there's an interesting little footnote from World War II. There was a German interrogator who was a master at getting information out of captured American flyers. And how he did it was he became friends with them. You know, he'd bring them extra food, just sit and talk, get to know them, talk about their families, even arrange for them to leave the POW camp and just visit the local town so he could see what life was really like in Germany. And he was amazingly effective, so much so that he was basically brought to the United States as part of Operation Paperclip in order to train interrogators here in the U.S. who apparently have forgotten those wise lessons.
Well, like I said, we don't seem to have learned, and you know, the world doesn't seem to have learned. We seem, you know, dedicated, and you know, we just seem like we want to make the same mistakes again and again, and they're not really mistakes. I think some of these people are out and out evil that are doing these things, and they know fully well what they're doing, how they're doing it, and for the reasons. I think Trump is basically stupid. That's his main problem. Stupid and naive, and he's just being suckered into this. You know,
he's apparently too easy to manipulate. Apparently, he succumbs to flattery, and I agree with you about the naivete. In fact, I even mentioned that during the campaign, that the downside of a Trump presidency was that he was going into the White House as dangerously naive about the reality of D.C. politics as Jimmy Carter was.
I just want to say one other thing. You know, I saw a tweet by my Congressman Mark Meadows and about supporting Haspel, and I told him, no, I'm not going to support. She shouldn't be supported. She's a criminal. I just want to tell Frank from North Carolina and a bunch of other people I know that fall from North Carolina. I don't know if Mark Meadows is their congressman or not. If he is, and you could do it anyway, tweet him and say, we don't go for that. And he also was backing Netanyahu the other day, too, saying that we got to listen to what Benjamin Netanyahu says, and that when Netanyahu, every time he opens his mouth, the lie comes out.
Yes.
That's when you know he's lying when his mouth. Because 2002, he said the same thing. And the last thing I want to say is, as far as the boys from Brazil, if Hitler ever did something like that with clones, I wish he did it in 1952 in Russia and cloned a few more pupils. Because boy, could this world use them, including this country.
Yeah, I agree with you on that one. The problem with cloning, and Boys in Brazil tried to address it, is you can have a genetic, identical genetic copy of a person, but what they turn into is based on their life experience.
good thing at the end is what's the guy's Wiesenthal? He refused to after the rest of the boys killed. He refused to give up the list because he realized this kid fixed his life when he sicked his Doberman on what's his name, on Mengele, and you know, he didn't do that. And this was an exact clone, supposedly, of Hitler. So it doesn't go like that. We're basically that's why I believe we do have a soul. I don't know. I know you're kind of an atheist, and I'm a secular, you know, guy. I don't believe in organized religion, but I do believe in God. I believe we have a soul, and I think that was another good thing about the book and the movie. It showed that it's really the soul more than your genetic makeup.
Well, that of course, you know, flies in the face of the liberal position, which is we're all born with blank minds, and everything that we think or believe or know comes from the environment, which the liberals seek to control. But before I let you go, I mean, there's one more thing to consider, and that's to look at the lives of identical twins and see how very often they diverge onto just these incredibly different paths. So anyway, Mark, we're going to let you go. And we're going to do a shout out to our honor affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. And we're going to switch to Al in Canada. Aloha, Al. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
You know, I agree with everything that you're saying with your last caller and the caller before that. You know, here's the thing. When Donald Trump, you know, finishes with politics, whether by his own decision or not, he's not going to be traveling all around the world building houses for poor people, is he? Are any of these other politicians going to be doing that?
No, Jimmy Carter was unique among that, and I have to admit that the only former president I would really be honored to meet is Jimmy Carter.
I agree with you 100%. And it's, you know, it's too bad that, you know, some of these other idiots that are, you know, it's not just your country, Mike. I mean, this is happening in most Western countries, including Canada. The politicians, they just don't care, right?
Yep.
They're just following the rules. You know, that's in another playbook than the one that they presented upon, you know, their politicking for their certain job, whatever it is. You know, the liberals up here have had, you know, like this red book and, you know, blah, blah, blah. But you know, once they get in the power, they don't care. They just, you know, do whatever they want, whatever they're told by whoever, you know, has the most money, I suppose. And, you know, we get the shaft. And, you know, any politician or any official in any kind of, you know, job of power that endorses torture should be tortured. And I don't mean, you know, 5 minutes of waterboarding. No. You take the most extreme case that has ever happened, and that's what you do to them. And then see if they change their mind at the end, assuming that they live. It reminds me of a Samuel L. Jackson movie called Unthinkable. Did you ever see that one? Where he's a torturer. He tortures
Yes, I did see that.
Oh, it was just ghastly.
Yes.
You know, they show little snippets here and there of what he's doing to this guy. And, of course, you know, it being Hollywood, they turn it around right at the end. And, you know, the guy's claiming his innocence the whole time, but meanwhile, he was guilty as a sin. But, you know, does that honestly really happen? Is anybody really that strong? You know,
no,
I wouldn't be.
No, under torture, everybody breaks. The problem is if they don't actually know what the torturer thinks they do, they're in this Kafkaesque nightmare. And the reality is that under Gina Haspel, the CIA tortured innocent Iraqis to death trying to find the weapons of mass destruction, which ultimately turned out never existed. So I think they all ought to be charged with murder.
They knew it.
I think they should be charged with murder.
They didn't exist, Mike.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
they should have been.
I don't know.
You know, they knew.
Hang on a second, Al. Al, hang on a second. I don't know that the people at the level of the actual torturers knew the WMDs didn't exist. That information was kept at the very top levels of the government. But I think these people should be charged with murder because that's what they did. They grabbed these innocent Iraqis, they tortured them to death. That, to me, is premeditated first-degree homicide.
It is. And not to mention what the people in Iraq and other Muslim countries now think of these other people, like the United States, France, Britain, Canada, Australia, anyone that was involved in that. You want to talk about inciting hatred?
Yeah.
That's how you do it. That's how you turn a whole bunch of people against another group of people. Divide and conquer, Mike. Aren't they brilliant?
Well, not from where I
I
sit.
appreciate your time.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to
No,
let you
they're
go. Thank you for the phone call. No, from where I sit, they aren't too brilliant. They've made horrendous decisions down through the years, decisions with far-reaching consequences. But unfortunately, most of the people making those decisions, they're only thinking about the immediate agenda: more money, more power, more war. And they really don't care what the long-term consequences are going to be for the American people or the people in those foreign countries, or even for the country itself. So, now, getting on back, we have another caller. Jeff in Georgia. Aloha, Jeff. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Michael. I appreciate the opportunity to talk. Michael, the CIA has to be shut down. This was Kennedy's dream.
Yeah.
You know, the CIA has been involved in so many evil things. I mean, in the 50s, it overthrew our bands. Even the overthrow of Trujillo, which the CIA had involvement, was illegal. The CIA was involved in the Kennedy assassination. James Angleton, some people believe, was involved collaborating with the Mossad on the USS Liberty. The CIA was involved in the soft overthrow of Nixon because you had Hunt and Sturgis, who were the plumbers. The CIA has to be eliminated. There's a lot of good people in the CIA that need to be given different jobs. The intelligence gathering needs to be embedded back with the Department of Defense. The CIA is like a serial killer, Michael. You cannot pardon it. There's no way to reform it. It's killed too many people, and it's embarrassed our country. It's brought down presidents. The CIA, I believe this, other people may not, was involved in the attempted assassination of Charles de Gaulle in 1962 because Permindex, the CIA, our intelligence had some tie. It had some tie back to Permindex, and they were paying money to Colonel Theory. The Day of the Jackal is a movie made about the attempted assassination of Charles de Gaulle. The CIA cannot be reformed. It has to be eliminated, and some people may need to be put on trial. I doubt it, but Alan Dulles, James Angleton, Richard Helms. I mean, these people were criminals in what they did, and there's no reform, Michael. That's all I had to say. You have a great show.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go. There is no question that intelligence agencies in general tend to go rogue. They tend to see themselves as above the law. We saw that with the FBI in the 1960s with COINTELPRO and much more recent events. They feel the laws don't apply to them. And it is an artifact of intelligence agencies, and certainly including the CIA. And one of the reasons the CIA was involved in drug smuggling in Vietnam and then later in Central America was to have a source of finance that was not subject to congressional oversight and approval. So they've really gone rogue. And way back when CIA was being formed, Harry Truman said this could turn out to be a serious threat to what this nation is supposed to be about. And he was absolutely right. Okay, getting on back to the economic news here. U.S. Vice President Mike Pence is set to announce even more sanctions on Venezuela. And he said this in a speech to the Organization of American States earlier today. Now, this is the downside of the globalized economy. It can and has been weaponized to destroy other countries. And the U.S. has not been shy about wanting to bring Venezuela down for the crime of selling their oil for currencies other than the U.S. dollar. And Venezuela is hovering right on the edge. Apparently, Venezuela's creditors are planning seizures following Venezuela's defaults. They're already getting ready to go on in and say, well, we're going to cut that, and we're going to cut this, and we're going to do this, and we're going to do that, and take stuff away. Probably the petroleum industry infrastructure is high on their list. Now, Venezuela, meanwhile, is dealing not only with external economic warfare, but internal corruption. And apparently, Venezuela arrested 11 top officials from the country's largest private bank and announced the state would intervene in the institution's activities, at least temporarily, to clean up purported illicit activity. Boy, it's a shame we can't do that here. We're going to take another break for commercials. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And again, for those of you who would like to support Republic Broadcasting, and we do need your help, the postal address to send a check or money order, or if you prefer anonymity, cash, is Republic Broadcasting Network, 2251 Double Creek Drive, number 302, Round Rock, Texas, 78664. The phone number, if you want to pledge to be a recurring subscriber, is 800-724-2719, extension 03. And a reminder, the front site promotion has been extended through June 2nd. It didn't end last week. Apparently, there was a lot of late demand and interest in this, so the front site promotion has been extended to June 2nd. For a one-time $500 donation to RBN, you get a lifetime Commander membership at Front Sight Academy. And it looks like a sweet deal. If I lived anywhere on the west coast of the U.S., I would take advantage of it myself. All right, so let's get on back to the economy. And we're talking about how creditors are getting ready to just start seizing Venezuelan property because they can't pay their debts. And if you think about it, that is the ultimate aim of every private central bank, to plunge a nation so far into debt that the bankers can seize the public assets. We've already seen it happening over in Greece under the name of austerity, and the Greeks are riled up about that again. Private central banking is a system of enslavement, but it only works if you believe it's something real. So we were also talking about the fact that Venezuela had arrested a bunch of their top bankers, and it's a shame we can't do that here. We keep seeing all these stories coming on out about fraud being committed by Deutsche Bank, by Wells Fargo, by all these big players, and nothing ever happens. They get a wrist slap fine, most of which they take off their taxes for the following year, and things go on as usual. Now, China has halted all orders for U.S. soybeans due to the trade tensions. And they are now going to be obtaining their soybeans mostly from Brazil, which is a huge producer of soybeans. And they may be non-GMO as well. And China does not like GMO anyway. But apparently China is going to be sourcing from Brazil and Canada, mostly Brazil. And a lot of experts did predict that Brazil would be one of the beneficiaries of the U.S.-China trade war. So that's what's going on there. So let's talk about immigration. There are a lot of interesting things going on here, and one of them is from actor James Wood, who even though he always plays these bad guys, I have a lot of respect for him. He's got a very high IQ. Earlier today, he came out with a tweet about what's going on here on the big island of Hawaii. But apparently, he riled up the Democrats with a tweet in which he posted a video of Muslims filling into the Nickelodeon universe at the Mall of America in Bloomington, Minnesota. And basically came on out saying, the Mall of America now looks like the Mall of Somalia. And again, it's this huge influx of refugees, and it's erasing what America is supposed to be. Now, over at Santander Bank, they threatened to close a woman's account after she described Bradford as Curryland to a call center worker. So obviously, ordinary people in Europe ordinary people here in the United States are really fed up with all of this. We've reached the end of our patience with all of this open borders nonsense. Now, over in North Carolina, 28 illegal immigrants have been arrested for child rape. And that brings the number of child sex crimes committed by illegals this year to 69. Over in East London, there's been another acid attack. This had 3 victims, and no arrests have been made in connection with the attacks. But it's known that acid attacks are a favored form of assault by some of these Middle Eastern refugees, along with knife crime. And this whole mass immigration, refugee, open borders is just proving to be so bad for the nations. Now, do you remember where there was that caravan of Central Americans headed for the border in California? And Trump said he was going to stop it. Well, apparently, the entire caravan got into the United States, primarily because Governor Jerry Brown did not deploy the National Guard to the border. All right, we're going to take a break for commercials. We've got a caller waiting on the line, and we will be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. We're going to go back to the phones here. Curtis in Nevada, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. I missed the first part of your show, so I don't know if you talked about what's going on, in Hawaii regarding the.
Oh yeah, that was right at the top of the show.
Okay, so what does it look like? Are you guys secure, or are you going to have to become refugees?
Well, again, all the volcanic activity and quakes and everything are happening down on what we call the Big Island, the island of Hawaii, as distinct from the name for the entire state. Claire and I live on Oahu. We're quite a bit away from that. Right now, the VOG is blowing off in a different direction. We've hardly felt any of the quakes this far up, and the only area of concern that we have is that there might be a large movement of land either at the surface of the Pacific Ocean or down along the flanks of the Big Island. There are some large bulges there, which if they were to cut loose, we would see a tsunami. But we live at 440 feet altitude, so we'd be pretty much okay.
Yeah, there's a lot of that going around, not just in Hawaii, but all over the world. There's a lot of earth movement, which leads me to where I don't discount anything as being remote possibilities, at least. Is that about 10 years ago, I was doing an overnight security job, and I would look out into the sunrise, and there was more than 3 or 4 times, honestly, that I would look up, see the sun clear the horizon, and then about 10 minutes later, see something else to the left of it, about maybe 10 degrees, clear the horizon. Okay? So, and that was before all this, talk about Planet X. And I remember that, and I can't discount that. You see what I mean? And with all this seismic activity, all this Earth, thing going on, I just cannot say that that's totally impossible.
Well, I mean, if there really was a Planet X out there, in theory, everybody would be able to see it. And all we get on that issue are photos and videos of dubious production value, claiming to show Planet X out there as filling a significant part of the sky. And yet, when you walk on out with your own telescope or binoculars, it can't be found. So that's not a theory that I subscribe to at all.
Right.
But what we're seeing here is just nature being nature. And right now, Hawaii is flooded at one end and on fire on the other end. But Claire and I live in the middle.
Right. Well, they said you need to see it with an infrared lens, but that's just something to look out for. But the reason why I called is, first of all, the Haskell thing. I mean, to me, hiring all these dubious people, bringing them or trying to bring them to the post, is not necessarily just poor judgment, but to me, the fact that she's hesitating herself, she doesn't want to go through the scrutiny, tells me that maybe he's trying to expose these people. And even if they're put in the post, he's going to expose John Bolton for John Bolton maybe pushing too hard against him, or even Pompeo, or something like that. Okay.
No,
so
I disagree. I want to do Occam's razor here again. Trump is just, unfortunately, he's a weak leader, and he's being manipulated by the people around him to basically put the neocon deep state back in the saddle, as it were. And I find it amazing that with Trump basically giving them everything that they want, that they're still trying to find a way to impeach him, because he's not in the club. He's not part of Skull and Bones. He's not this, he's not that.
Yeah.
So that's the simple explanation, unfortunately.
Well, okay, Giuliani. Okay, Giuliani has gone out there and he's looked like a train wreck every time they put a mic in front of him, right?
I agree.
To me, I'm not worried. Yeah, but to me, I think that's a tactic. That, you know what, we're going to distract this deep state. They're not going to be able to know what we really think, because we're just being so erratic. And I've said this before, that Trump's been doing it himself. They don't know what to think. He's not consistent enough for them to be able to predict and to make their moves. And I think that's what Giuliani's doing, I hope. Okay?
Well, even Fox News was running a story just a little while ago wondering if Giuliani is actually helping or hurting Donald Trump. And at this point, I tend to think it's more hurt than help.
Right. You know, Mike, I just want to make another point about the Iran deal, okay?
Okay.
Once again, people are worried about he's going to do something foolish, like they have said about North Korea, like they said about Syria. And I think Trump will start to pull the saber rattling, and he may even pull out or threaten to pull out. But the biggest thing that he wants to accomplish is he wants the people to investigate this Trump deal from the last administration.
You mean the Obama deal?
That's what it is. Because that's where the criminality can be found out. You're going to find Kerry, you're going to find McCain, Hillary, Obama. That's the reason why he wants to put a focus on it. And down the line, the same thing with the economy. He's going to put a focus on that Fed Reserve and an audit. See, Trump is playing chess. And then when the things that he does, people see, they're thinking at it as a direct move, checkers move. So that's why they don't understand what he's doing.
Well, I have to disagree with you. And I know you're an optimist and you still want to believe that Donald Trump is doing a good job, but I do have to disagree with you.
He's trying.
I don't think so. I think he's been totally co-opted, controlled, whatever you want to call it. And I'm expecting that tomorrow he will announce he's pulling out of the Iran deal.
I think he might. But then at some point they'll say, okay, let's go back and look into it and rearrange or renegotiate. Okay.
Well, he's been saying that all along. He's been saying that all along.
Yeah.
He wants the Iran nuclear deal to include Iran's long-range missiles that could reach to Israel. And Iran has already said that was never part of the original deal. And that's where the friction came from. So, Curtis, I'm going to let you go. We're just going to have to agree to disagree on this. I know you're trying to find some indication that Trump is still a good guy. And I'm not saying he's a bad guy. But at this point, he seems to be very weak. He's susceptible to flattery. He's easy to manipulate. And he is being manipulated by everybody around him.
Okay. All right, Mike. We'll see what happens.
All right, we certainly will. Thanks a lot for the phone call. We're going to let you go. The phone lines are now open, 800-313-9443. So getting on back to immigration, apparently that entire caravan of Hondurans made it into the United States, primarily because Governor Jerry Brown failed to deploy the National Guard to the border as requested by Donald Trump. And again, mixed signals here. The Trump administration last Friday has said that it's ending special immigration protection for about 57,000 Hondurans, adding them to hundreds of thousands of immigrants from other countries that are losing permission to be in the United States. So this is starting to unwind a little bit. Hondurans will have until January 5th, 2020 to basically find a new home. Now, over in Sweden, a 10-year-old girl was attacked by 3 men after she left school and was on her way home. She was taken to a cemetery in Distervala in Sweden. And this happened last Thursday. And here's where it gets really interesting. The police are refusing to issue a description of the perpetrators. The police investigator, Daniel Nilsson, said, we do not want to publish it in the media. Now, Sweden is one of those countries in Europe that has literally passed laws saying that if a refugee commits a crime, the fact that they are a refugee is banned from publication. And so the fact that the police are refusing to release a description of the rapists who raped this 10-year-old girl tells us already who it was. Now, Gustav Kasselstrand, he's the leader and founder of the New Alternative for Sweden party, has attacked Sweden's migration policy. And he's saying that multiculturalism is a total failure and that it's time to start sending migrants back who don't want to integrate into Sweden's society. And he goes on to say the historical experience of multicultural societies basically points to hostility. You don't get good results. You get conflicts and disagreements, which is what's been happening. Down in Australia, they have 1,300 people in their refugee camp, and they're facing a problem in that they can't find any other nation willing to resettle these asylum seekers. Everybody's just fed up with this whole situation. It's gone on way too long. It's causing all kinds of harm. Now, maybe Australia ought to think about letting some of these people, shall we say, colonize the outback. Australia has a lot of room, and a lot of it looks like where some of these people came from in the first place. All right, let's take another phone call. Kevin in West Virginia, aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mr. Mike, I hope you're having a great and wonderful day, and I hope Ms. Claire's having a great day, too.
Yep.
A couple of questions that I have is about Jeff Sessions. My first question is, from him recusing himself, with him not doing anything, can he be arrested for obstructing the entire Justice Department being Attorney General?
Yeah, I think he can be arrested for obstruction of justice. At the very least, he could be impeached. And they're already talking about contempt of Congress charges for him, which is relatively minor.
Sure. I was just wondering, since there's no action under his part, and like I agree with you, you said before, Larry Claimant and I think Tom also Justice Watch or something like that would be a great AG. But as, nothing is being done, here's, blatantly open crimes, Uranium One, Hillary's emails. I mean, we can go down the laundry list of crimes.
Yep.
What is this guy's issue? Or is he, I've asked before, what do they have on him? And since he's not acting, can we call for this guy, for not doing anything, at the least, he needs to be in trouble for not doing anything. I mean, screw the...
he should be fired.
Truesdale.
Trump should fire him just, for sitting on his duff and doing absolutely nothing. I mean, Donald Trump, one of the promises he made during the campaign was Hillary Clinton in jail, and that's the one I most wanted to see. And under Trump's Title II authority, he can fire anybody at any time for any reason. And of course, the corporate media will say, oh, it's obvious evidence of a cover-up. We've got another corruption scandal, But Trump needs to stop listening to the corporate media because most of America has stopped listening to the corporate media. And Trump really needs to focus more on what's out here in the independent media because the independent media is the reason why the corporate media failed to put Hillary in the White House.
Sure, absolutely. You know, and you made a good point with your last caller. I think his name was Curtis. You know, we can agree to disagree. And I love that you said that, because at the end of the day, you know, we're Americans. We need to stand up for one another. And if we don't, if I don't stand up for you, when they come and take you, when they come to take me, nobody's going to stand up for me. And that's what I wish we would do in this country, is have each other's backs and screw, you know, the different beliefs and everything like that. At the end of the day, we have a same common heritage, and that's we're American. Let's start acting like it.
Yes.
I mean, not you, but, you know, other people in general. I mean, you know, and that's what's so great, is we can disagree. But like I said, at the end of the day, I'm putting my life on the line to disagree with what you got to say, because it's only fair.
Okay.
And that's all I have. And that's all I have for you, Mr. Mike. I just wish, you know, more people would be like you and just put down these differences and just come together under the First Amendment, under the entire Bill of Rights, honestly.
Yeah, we better use that Bill of Rights, because they're trying to take it away. The Second Amendment is under attack. They're ignoring the Fourth and Fifth Amendments completely. They're ignoring the 10th Amendment completely. And now they're trying to sell the idea that there should be exceptions to the First Amendment. You know, you're not allowed to criticize Israel. That's off limits. And once they do that, there'll be other exceptions. Okay? You're not allowed to criticize vaccines. You're not allowed to criticize GMO. You're not allowed to criticize the poor quality products put out by American corporations. We're already on that slippery slope down to where we're going to lose everything this country was founded on.
I totally agree. Will you give me Claire the best? And you have a great rest of the show, sir.
All right, I certainly will. Thanks an awful lot. And by the way, for those who were asking, Claire is actually doing a lot better now. She's not totally over her bad back, but she's really doing a lot better. And we know what the problem really is. It's her L5 vertebra. And so I'm just doing my best to take care of her. All right, let's take another phone call. Francis in North Carolina. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha to you both.
Aloha.
As well as everyone shaking and baking over in that other island.
Yeah.
Best wishes to them. Best wishes to them.
Yeah. Thank
I
you.
know that the various various alphabet soup agencies, as well as the various parts of the electoral programs, if you want to call it that, or groups are concerned, politicians-wise, all that, or probably listening to your show and so forth. I have a word of advice for them, at least for here in North Carolina. Stop with the bloody robocalls. You're turning me off. If you want a voter, turn the crap off. No more. Enough is enough. You're taking up room on answering service, so get out of my ear. Later.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, the robocalls, whether it's politicians or even telemarketing, it's like that do not call list doesn't exist anymore. I actually got a telemarketing call the other day. The message was recorded in Chinese. And I'm trying to figure, how on earth did they ever think they were going to get a customer from this? But it is totally out of control, and it's very, very frustrating to deal with. Francis, we're going to have to let you go. We're doing another commercial break, and we'll be back with another caller after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. We're going to go right back to the telephones now to Sherry in Texas. Aloha, Sherry. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Mike. I'm getting your whole show from 3 o'clock. I started at 3, and I thought this must be a repeat, but it wasn't, so I'm back. And
Okay.
I want to talk about something you're talking about just now. It's already been said by somebody else that there's not going to be a war. I didn't think there would be anyway. But it's going to be against the deep state and what they're doing to our Constitution. And this will be the war. And I can point to other things to why I think this. That would take up a lot of time. Let me just go to an example that I was faced with. I texted my son and daughter-in-law because I was in harm's way. There was a huge it seemed like a power surge, but it wasn't. It was that the electric company had the power into our homes up. They they elevated the power to our homes. And this came on the heels of a fiber optic cable being installed in a tower nearby. And it's there to accommodate, I think, smart technology. There's going to be homes that may have to be rewired because of this surge. This is why everyone's bill went up so much.
Well,
and
hang on just a minute. Hang on just a minute. Okay, let's back up. First of all, a fiber optic cable is not going to have any effect on the electricity going into your home. Now, when you say there's a surge, are you telling me that the power company is overvolting your house?
That's exactly it. And they wanted me to talk to somebody who they had hired to explain this. I said, if it has to do with power surges, I don't want to hear it. There are such a thing as power surges. They're selling these little things you can buy to protect yourself from a power surge, more money, right? But this isn't what it is. This was, I phoned the electric company, and I said, you get this thing down right now. I've just had my fluorescent blowout that always takes 2 minutes to come on. I've had a plug just melted from my heater. This was the first part of March, and it was still cool. And I'm in trying to get it out of the wall. The whole plate was blackened, and I could see that it had melted. And my lights were blowing out. My water heater overheated, and it was also set incorrectly at the factory. It was set at 130 instead of 120 degrees. So it came to me overheated anyway. And I've had all that fixed. I've got a lot of 25-watt bulbs. I like the soft light 25-watt. You can't read by them, but I have brought everything down so much to accommodate this increase of power to our homes. I think it's the text I said to my son and daughter-in-law said that this had happened. I feel like I'm in harm's way, but I have talked to the utility company, and they're going to do something about it. And they came down immediately, and I tested it with the fluorescent that was in the kitchen, flicking it on, and it came on with a little flicker instead of boom, like the sun's just above you. You know, it came on so strong. And it came on with a little flicker. That's kind of normal. I barely ever use it because it's not good to work under those things.
Okay,
but
well,
you
Sherry,
have to know.
Sherry, okay.
My text was refused. The company wouldn't let me send it.
Sherry, we have to let you go for station identification. My advice to you is get an electrician, a trained professional electrician to come in and check out your home and make sure you're getting the correct voltage out of the wall because what you're describing to me doesn't make a lot of sense. So we're going to take a break here. We'll be right back after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 3. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. And again, a reminder, the Front Sight Academy promotion has been extended to June 2nd. So the May 5th thing has gone away. It's June 2nd, so you still have a chance to take advantage of this wonderful deal. All right, we're going to go back to the phones. Lisa in Pennsylvania. Aloha, Lisa. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, Michael. I hope you're doing well today, or as well as can be expected. I'm glad to know that you're out of the danger zone in terms of that volcano.
Yes.
The reason why I'm calling is I'm starting to get a little depressed and lose faith in humanity due to this Russiagate BS story that it seems like people who used to have discerning minds and really look into things are just buying it. And I'm wondering, can you give us any hope in terms of, do you think this is ever going to be brought to light that it was a made-up thing? Or, give us some hope, would you?
Well, you find your hope where you look for it, but the reality is we have brought it to light. And the polls are showing that the majority of the American people do think this is all a witch hunt. And I'm very glad to see that we have these now 3 federal judges who are out there basically telling Mueller that if he can't come up with some hard factual evidence, they're just going to throw out all these lawsuits. And so I think very, very few people are still drinking the Kool-Aid from the corporate media. That's certainly my experience just talking to people around here.
Well, I hope you're correct. And in terms of the corporate media, I understand that the viewership and readership is down quite a bit, but it's really an uphill battle to fight that because it saturates humanity. Do you know what I'm saying? It's hard to avoid some sort of talking point that, originated with the corporate media. So I usually just try to encourage people to shut off that TV and, look at alternative media outlets and, get rid of the Washington Post and things like that, which has clear CIA connections, and nobody seems to care. It's out in the open. They're not hiding it. That Jeff Bezos, who owns the Washington Post, he's also the owner of Amazon and sits on the Pentagon board. But still people trust the Washington Post, or as you say, what do you call it?
The Washington Compost.
There you go. Anyhow, I was just a little bummed out, but I guess you're right. Now that you mentioned those judges, I had kind of forgotten about that. So maybe when they're asked to produce evidence and cannot, this will finally come to an end. Well, I certainly hope so. And, of course, one of the judges wants to see the original unredacted scope memo that Rod Rosenstein wrote for Robert Mueller and find out if Mueller really did go off the reservation, which obviously he did. His mandate was Trump-Russia collusion. They found absolutely nothing, so Mueller's going after Trump's associates. They're so desperate to find something that they can tarnish Trump with. They're dealing with this porn star, Stormy Daniels. Right. And right. Her face is plastered all over the place. She's getting her 15 minutes of fame. And I'll be very honest, I'm sick and tired of hearing about her. Oh, me too. Me too. Okay, well, that's all I have. Thank you. Actually, you did sort of brighten things up here, so I appreciate it. And thank you for taking my call. Well, thank you for the call here. And, how we get this out there is that we all talk to everybody we know, or we email them. Don't bother with social media. That's already totally filtered. But they can't put a filter over your mouth. And so you just talk to people, everybody that you meet, and just, anybody who gets up there and says, oh, no, our government would never do that, and just, remind them that we were lied to about Iraq's nuclear weapons. And if they're still on the defensive, then you're probably dealing with an undercover informant, and there are, unfortunately, a lot of these lowlifes permeating our society. All right, let's go back to the phones. Lenny in California, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike, how you doing?
Doing fine.
Hey, listen, I was driving home and I was listening to the earlier part of your show. And as far as Venezuela and the more sanctions that have been announced against them, it was more than likely the arresting of the bankers that got the sanctions brought against them. Okay, because sanctions have been against them anyway, and they've been making deals with people like India and China, and to sell the oil and the cryptocurrency in order to keep their system going. But in my humble opinion, it was the arresting of the bankers that got them sanctioned more. As far as Macron and the EU saying that Assad can now stay. All right, and they don't care what the U.S. does as far as the Assad is concerned. To me, it's just another case of good cop, bad cop in the long game that the U.S. and the EU are playing for their Zionist banking masters, are in my opinion. Because as soon as it's convenient for them to say Assad can go again, they're just going to turn around and say that he can go again. And my question to them is, who in the hell are they to say somebody can stay or go who's been elected in their own country by their own people in the first place?
Well, they don't really have a right to do that, but we're seeing all these great imperial powers. We're literally going back to the age of colonialism.
Well, that's what they're trying to take it back to. But can you blame a man who's being lynched for struggling to stay alive? And that's what these people are doing, and I don't blame them. All right. Now, I want to get to what I really want to talk about was the parliamentary elections in Lebanon. Regardless of the Saudi money in Israel telling them who they should and shouldn't have, Hariri lost big time.
Yes.
And not only did he lose their mic, he's in bigger trouble because now he's expendable. Okay. Yes. They can get rid of him just like they did his daddy before him because he's of no more use to them. All right? And the people chose the strength and honor of Hezbollah, who took 67 of the 128 seats in the parliament.
Yep. You're absolutely right.
Okay. And so So, and I'm telling you, he's in bigger trouble now. Now, what Hezbollah and the Lebanese and the Syrians and Iranian and the biggest winners out of this is Iran, in my opinion. Okay, because they're getting even stronger. But what they have to watch now is Israel coming in, or the CIA, that evil entity that Paul spoke about earlier, the caller who, and he's 100% right. I'm with him. All right. What they have to watch now is them assassinating Hariri like they did his daddy, and then blaming it on the Hezbollah or Assad or Iran or Russia, so they can start another world war.
Well, I think, well, first of all, the issue would be Hariri is now going to be out of power. There's not much point in assassinating him, other than to silence him. I think the real danger, though, is that Israel may just haul on off with another attack on Lebanon and do a targeted strike against Beirut in an attempt to disrupt the new incoming government so that it can be toppled and there can be another Hariri-like puppet ruler put in place. Because that's where Hariri's father came from. It was a covert intervention to regime change the country.
Okay, here's my question. What does Israel think Hezbollah is going to do once they do that?
Well, Hezbollah is going to fight back, obviously, and it could ignite a new Israeli-Lebanese war. And we know that Israel's been talking tough about Lebanon, including veiled threats of military action if Hezbollah won this parliamentary election, which they did. We know that Israel still wants that Litani River. They're running short of water in Israel, and they're just going to go ahead and steal it from other people.
Well, welcome to the world, Israel. The Palestinians have been running short of water since you took theirs. All right? So here's my thing. What happened to Israel the last time they attacked Lebanon and Hezbollah fought back? How did Israel fare then?
They didn't do very well, and ultimately, though, Israel could drag the U.S. government into a new war on Lebanon.
Yeah, and that's the plan. And since that new base, American base, is set up in Israel, I think that's why it was set up. They want a world war one way or the other, and they're not going to stop until they get it. But my thing is fine. If you want to start, finish what you start. But, I don't think American soldiers, men and women and children, should be dying for it.
I agree. I absolutely agree. I absolutely agree.
All right, thank you for your time, sir.
These wars are cooked up by these ancient fossilized politicians for middle-aged people to pay for and young people to die in. All right, well, Lenny, thank you for the phone call. We're going to let you go. The phone lines are open again. We're going to do a shout-out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining the network. Now, out in Chula Vista, California, artists painted a mural on the wall of a school. And basically it depicted an Aztec warrior carrying the severed head of President Donald Trump on a spear. And in his other hand, he had a heart, presumably from Trump, given the history of Aztec sacrifices. And it promptly created a huge outrage, and it was immediately covered up after the local news made inquiries. But by then, photos taken by students with their cell phones had already gone viral. So now the mural has been repainted to remove the offending image. And it's another reminder, our public education system has been taken over by the liberals, and it's no longer about education, it's about indoctrination. They're trying to brainwash our kids to make them good little liberals who will believe as they're told to believe and do as they're told to do. That's basically it here. Now, story coming out of TechDirt, it appears that law enforcement in this country do not like it when the public complains about their behavior. And there's a lot to complain about. Unjustified tasings, unjustified shootings. Remember that story we had last week? They had a prisoner on the ground. He'd surrendered. He'd gotten down, on his own. No resistance whatsoever. There was an officer on his back, had the cuffs on him, and a second officer runs up and just delivers a kick to his head. Now, obviously, that should require a complaint. So apparently, police officers are now abusing certain laws so that they can arrest people for trying to file complaints. And apparently this is really out of control down in the state of Louisiana. And what they're doing is they're trying to say that a complaint against a police officer represents criminal defamation. And if the person goes to court, simply by proving that the police officers really did what was reported in the complaint, the case will get thrown out of court. But it costs ordinary citizens a huge amount of money to go to court to fight a defamation charge. And of course, the police are getting funded by the police union and the police departments. So it doesn't cost them anything. This is another example of a practice called lawfare, where you just sue people in order to bankrupt them. Not because they did something wrong or that you think you're right, it's just getting rid of them by suing them into bankruptcy. And that's becoming a growing phenomenon in this country as well. Well, a little bit of good news over at Citizens Free Press. There was a 70-year-old grandmother was at home, and this guy broke into her home, and she used the gun that she had pretty much for the first time. Wasn't really trained up, but she shot the guy. That's how you use your Second Amendment rights. Apparently, Lieutenant Colonel Oliver North, remember him from the paper shredding and everything. Apparently, he's going to be the next president of the NRA. And I don't know that that was absolutely the best choice NRA could have made, but that's where they're going with that. Now, U.S. actress Alyssa Milano went to an anti-NRA protest and has been denounced as a hypocrite because she went there surrounded by armed guards as personal protection. So that's the message it sends. You know, ordinary people can't have guns. I need guns because I'm special. I'm an actress. I'm famous. I have to be protected. Now, over in Queens, New York, police raided a home, and they found a small arsenal of guns and ammo. Officers hauled off 16 rifles, a crossbow, 13,000 rounds of ammunition. They took it from a man named Keith Harvey, who's 44, and he works as a contractor. And the police just grabbed all of this. Now, this man, Harvey, has no prior criminal records. And they have charged him with multiple counts of illegal weapons possession. Apparently, 3 of the rifles were assault weapons. And they posted his bail at $150,000, which apparently he can't pay, and he's still in jail heading for a trial. Now, Harvey's neighbor, Joe Russo, said there's no reason for all this fuss. The allegations are insane. He's a gun collector. He got the bug from his father. Most of the weapons that Harvey had been left to him by his father. But the police wanted a nice spectacular target. Ooh, look at all the guns we got, which was what led the BATF to make that disaster down in Waco. So they just came on down, and law-abiding citizen's house, they broke on in, took all of his guns, thrown him in jail. We're going to make an example. We're going to send a message. Well, there's another message, and this has to do down with the confessed Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School gunman. And he had made reference to something called promise. And it turned, the Broward school district officers were denying for week after week after week that Nicholas Cruz had any special treatment for his past criminal endeavors. Now they're admitting that yes, that Nicholas Cruz was assigned to this controversial disciplinary program. And basically, instead of jail, you have to go to this so-called promise program for a 3-day stint. And apparently this program was instituted by the Obama administration to balance out campus arrests and reduce the number of minority arrests to make everything kind of equal. So Cruz had referred to Promise after he vandalized a bathroom in the middle school on November 25th, 2013. I think this guy was spotted and groomed to be a shooter. I think it was another hoax. Okay, over on JetBlue. This is probably going to worry people who like to fly. There's been another incident of a failed window on an aircraft. JetBlue flight 1052 was in the air heading to Tampa Sunday when the outer layer of the front cockpit windshield shattered. Now, the plane didn't depressurize, but the window cracks did force the plane to be diverted to Fort Lauderdale International Airport. So what is going on with all of these aircraft that are just deciding to fail? Are the airlines, in fact, cutting too many corners on maintenance? Are the aircraft manufacturers cutting too many corners on building the planes? Because it seems like American aviation, commercial aviation, isn't what it was years ago. There have been all kinds of problems. And it's part of the decline of our empire, where we can't build the high-quality products we used to build. We can't maintain the products that we already have. To me, the signs of decay are obvious. We're a dying empire lashing out at the world in its death throes. So we're coming up here on another commercial break, and we'll be back after these commercials with more news about science, big pharma, medical, whatever, things like that. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. We're going to go back to the telephones. Brendan in San Francisco. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. I was watching some YouTube videos last night, and I came across an interesting video regarding people that are involved in these shootings are hearing voices, and the woman went through a laundry list of the past recent shootings, and each one of the suspects had claimed to be hearing voices. So I just continued watching the video, and they spoke about how there's the technology available. That's not why I'm calling. The reason I'm calling is because she referenced the shooter from Alaska that flew to Florida, and his name was Santiago Castillo. And watching the video, they show mainstream media interviewing who other than Sheriff Israel. Now, Sheriff Israel is the sheriff that called the stand down at the Parkland School. And I just thought that was just a little too coincidental, and I wanted to bring that to your attention. The video that referenced it was quite interesting on its own, but the reason I'm calling is because Israel had his fingerprints all over the guy that flew down from Alaska. Do you remember that? They gave him his firearm back after he claimed to be hearing voices. This is getting a little too cute, and I thought we could try to connect some more of these dots, but I had to share that with you.
Yeah, well, Sheriff Israel is in a little bit of trouble. Apparently, the local police union held a vote, and it came on out that all of the Parkland law enforcement have lost all confidence and trust in him. Plus, apparently, he is now being sued for negligence of duty by one of the parents of the children who was shot at that school, although because of prior legal precedents, I think that case will not have a happy outcome for the plaintiff.
Right. Well, it'll be interesting to see how the rest of that plays out, because that guy obviously has photos with Hillary Clinton. He's a Democrat, and he's probably some form of deep state. I hate to use that term. In fact, I'm kind of tired of deep state term, but he's entrenched for sure
Well, you know, a lot of high-level police officers are approached and recruited by CIA. And if you go all the way back to the assassination of Robert F. Kennedy, there was this witness, Susan Serrano, who saw Sirhan in the company of a woman in a polka dot dress, and she was taken in for an interview, which turned out to be a harassing session by an officer named Hernandez, who was rumored to have connections with the CIA, and he just tried to threaten her and bully her into changing her story. And ultimately, she turned around and sued, and because of the lawsuit, the audio recording of this officer trying to get her to change her testimony was made public.
Right. I actually heard her testimony, and she kept insisting, no, that's not what I saw. And they just berated her and bullied her. And I mean, it's like we are living in a Nazi Germany. In fact, one of the videos that I was referencing to on this call, they're saying that the Nazis never went away and that they've actually expanded, and they are well entrenched in our government, actual Nazi descendants. And this is just a continuation. I guess Rome was the first Reich. Hitler had the third. I don't know if we're in the fourth, but man, oh man, past this prologue, I've said it before. I mean, we just need to see what's coming. And Joel Skousen said that the Patriots, or the so-called conspiracy theorists, are going to be the new Jews. We are going to be the ones that are going to be genocided based on our beliefs and not being able to be reprogrammed. That's Joel Skousen said that.
Well, anything is possible. In these evil times, I wouldn't put anything past this government. If they think they can get away with it, they're going to do it. And I imagine they're in a state of panic right now because they've lost the ability to control the American people with propaganda. They've run out of money. The American people have no more to give. The American people are not supportive of government policies, and we're all clamoring for arrests to be made in all of these political scandals. So,
right, it's not going to happen. Are you covering any of this 5G that's coming at us? Because I believe that's going to be the new control mechanism. They're just going to poison us. I am not optimistic, and I hate to say that, but with the release of the 5G and the wavelength of that microwave, it's pretty telling. I mean, they're just going to bomb us with that, and I don't know where to go from there except Tibet or something.
Well, again, I think the concern over 5G is being overblown, like ClimateGate was. I think it's being put out there as a distraction to people to keep them from looking at what they should be looking at. And we're seeing a lot of that stuff. Anyway, listen, Brandon, I need to let you go. We got to take another break for commercials, and we will be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. Phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. So here's an interesting story, and it shows you just how powerful the vaccine lobby is. Up in Vancouver, the vice chair of British Columbia's Chiropractors College has resigned from his position after the Canadian Broadcasting Company revealed an anti-vaccination video he had created. Now, all the video said was that good nutrition is probably more effective at preventing illness than the vaccines. And, of course, the local doctors groups who are getting rich off of pushing vaccines, they went ballistic, and they brought pressure to bear and basically said, he's just a chiropractor. He doesn't know medicine. He's not qualified to speak. So they're on the attack there. Now, as you know, there's an opioid crisis in this country, and it has come from a combination of factors. First of all, the flood of new opium coming into this country from Afghanistan, coupled with the pharmaceutical companies and doctors' eagerness to sell you medications, even if they're not good for you. So here's a new study, and this comes from the University of Colorado at Boulder, and the study indicates that opioids actually delay healing. that they can actually cause chronic pain at the same time they're supposed to be numbing it. And they did this with this animal study. And they found that rats given repeated doses of morphine experienced inflammation and pain for 3 weeks longer than non-medicated test subjects. But it makes money. Therefore, it must be good. Because in the United States of America, what makes money is really, really good. And all those whiners about physical harm, they're just whining. Pay no attention to them. So let's get on over to Gardasil. Merck is being accused of fraud, deceit, and negligence. And there is a lawsuit now that is basically showing Merck's aggressive agenda to increase HPV vaccine uptake rates despite causing thousands of severe injuries. It's hitting this court case alleging blatant corruption. Now, according to the World Health Organization's VIGIA Access database, as of April 9, 2018, a total of 85,329 reports of adverse reactions have been filed regarding the HPV vaccination. These reports include 37,699 reports of nervous systems disorders, 2,450 cardiac disorders, including 38 cardiac arrests, 533 reports of postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome, over 3,200 reports of seizures or epilepsy, 8,453 syncope, and 389 deaths. This is one of the most dangerous vaccines out there, and they're pushing it and pushing it. Now they want little boys to take it, even though boys don't get cervical cancer. It's all about marketing. It's a very expensive shot. The practitioners get half that money. They're financially incentivized to chase you around the room with that needle. Now, last week we reported on this story where people who have been studying HPV are reporting that ever since these HPV vaccines have come on the scene, the number of cases is starting to rise alarmingly. It's kind of like autism. Pre-vaccination, very rare disease. Now we're getting all these vaccines shoved at our children, and I think the current number is 1 out of every 64 children will be somewhere on the autism disorder spectrum. And now the same thing is happening with these HPV vaccines. They start putting them on out in there, and for some reason, along with all the harm they're doing, HPV is now on the rise. And it's probably for the same reason that we have seen these so-called mumps and measles outbreaks among populations of vaccinated people, because the attenuated pathogen reverts to full potency when it is administered into the body. They had that problem with the polio vaccine a while back. It's just all driven by the money. It's all driven by the money. It's greed and a complete disregard for our fellow human beings, and that has got to stop. Now, China just did something rather amazing. It's an amazing piece of engineering. They have just completed the world's longest sea crossing bridge. It is 34 miles long. And they've got it open, they've unveiled it. It's going to be open for regular traffic later this year. But that's an amazing feat of engineering. See, China's investing in infrastructure. They're building up their country internally instead of spending all this money on war. So let's talk about human-caused global warming. Article coming out of ManhattanContrarian.com. Everyone knows that trying to control the climate by reducing CO2 emissions is a joke. First of all, several years ago, NASA came on out, shuffled their feet a little bit, and said that it had been determined that carbon dioxide in the atmosphere actually acts as a coolant. It doesn't behave like a pane of glass in a greenhouse because it captures some of the infrared radiation and re-emits it at a frequency that can escape back out into space. So, And, you know, this idea about a carbon tax and, you know, little bits of carbon, take a look at the Big Island right now. That volcano, just since last Friday, has put out more carbon dioxide than all the cars in the United States do in an entire month. There are other sources of carbon dioxide than human activity, but they want you to feel guilty about your component. They literally came out with this absurd idea that natural carbon dioxide is already balanced by natural carbon dioxide sinks. And that's really nonsense. The more carbon dioxide there is, plants will grow more, grow faster, produce more food. But they want you to think that you are responsible for harming planet Earth, and they'll solve the problem for you in exchange for more of your money and more of your obedience. And it's really a religion. The people who are out there screaming about the environment, it's just something that they can feel good about being part of. I'm part of Al Gore's organization. I'm trying to save the world. Turns out they don't really walk their talk. There was a study done by Cornell and the University of Michigan, and it basically found that those who were highly concerned about climate change were less likely to engage in individual actions like recycling and other eco-friendly behaviors. They found that the global warming skeptics, the people who were looking at this seriously and scientifically, tended to be, as a group, far more into recycling, not wasting food, and it's the ultimate hypocrisy. They don't really care about global warming or the environment. They just want your money and more authority over you. All right, let's take a phone call. Mark in Philadelphia. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, Michael. On the subject of what you just brought up a little bit earlier about, compromising of our fellow man, what I've noticed is, a lot of people, people that are in business, I'll pick out one group. A lot of firearms guys will say, catch me on Facebook, or a company that sells firearms or whatever, come on over and find out about us on Facebook. Listen, years ago when I first learned about Facebook, all I had to do was read the agreement, the original agreement, and I said, not no, but hell no. And 2 days in, I opted out. Now, I'm not the sharpest knife in the drawer, but so the question is, a lot of people say, oh, well, doing business with PayPal, that's okay. Doing a little bit of business with these companies, and even Amazon showing that they might not be so good for us either. Could they be the enemy in disguise? Oh, but doing a little bit of business with the enemy is okay, especially if it fulfills your bottom line, right? So you want me to come over to your business, and in order for me to come over to your business, I got to compromise my privacy, my information, even my family. In order to do business with you, you want me to do business with the devil. You want me to do business with the enemy. So I guess my question is, Mike, how far do we go, these platforms, oh yeah, well, it's convenient and it's real handy and it's a good way to connect, but, oh, never mind that they're doing some dirty deeds over to the side, for instance, PayPal, whenever that deal happened with the transgender thing in North Carolina,
yes,
PayPal was one of the first corporations that stood up and said, we're going to boycott your state if you don't fall in line and let transgenders go into women's bathroom and look up their skirt. What kind of ridiculousness is that? So we want to support PayPal? Now there's even some hosts on Republic that are saying, oh yeah, PayPal this and PayPal that. I said, yeah, but do you remember what PayPal did? They tend to forget that, especially if it fulfills their bottom line, so if they want to sell something. So I guess I'm asking you, Michael, how far do we go in doing business with the enemy and in letting them compromise us? Because I see it as it's danger.
Well, it is very dangerous because we're living in a time of extremely unethical behavior by corporations, and more importantly, we're starting to see corporations think they represent the government and have a right to go about imposing their will, their usually liberal agenda, on everybody else through threats of withholding their service. In the case of PayPal, it's hard to find an alternative that is as widely known and usable as PayPal. and some of the others, we just stopped using them at all. I've quit using Twitter and Facebook because, again, we're being filtered now, and I don't want to do business with them, especially after the way Facebook lied to us all about our privacy. So you're just going to have to take it on a case-by-case.
Mike, didn't you sense that was what they were about to begin with, especially when you hear that Zuckerberg himself thought we were a bunch of idiots, and he didn't say those words. He said worse words like we're dumb, whatever.
I remember what he said.
Right? So why? When I caught that, I said that's what he thinks of us and me. Forget it. I'm not doing business with somebody like that. He thinks he's an elitist. He's a little pomp-ass special person that thinks he's better than us, and he treats us however he wants. And I don't do business with people like that because they're here to hurt us. So why don't people wake up to that? See, and then when these corporations stood up and wanted to boycott the NRA, Hertz and some of these other corporations, I say we boycott them all. I don't care if I have to walk across town instead of renting a car. I'm going to do it. Screw them. I'm not going to let my countrymen be compromised. I'll leave it at that. So I say that I'm not going to do business with somebody that wants to encourage me to do business with the enemy. I will not do it. I stand for that. I stand for what's wholesome for our country. And if we don't, people should have started doing this before, and because that's how we got to this point. We let them move the line in the sand where they're basically taking everything, So I'll leave it at that, Mike. So maybe you can share that with the rest of the people out there and make some sense of this, because it doesn't make any sense to me why we're allowing ourselves to be compromised. And I won't do business with companies that compromise us. So thank you.
All right. Well, you're welcome. You probably heard the old story about boiling a frog slowly, and I don't know if that's actually true or not. And for obvious reasons, Mythbusters refused to do that particular experiment. But unfortunately, we're at a time of tremendous wealth inequality, and that gives the ultra-rich the means with which to oppress the rest of us. And eventually their ego gets the better of them, and they think because they're wealthy, they have a right to do that. Andrew Carnegie actually believed that the super rich were a completely different species of human being to be served by the other human beings down there on the workflow. And there is no restraint or control because the government is fully on the side of the ultra rich. Now, speaking of Zuckerberg, and as long as we're talking about Hawaii so much, over on Kauai, where they just had those horrible, horrible floods, Zuckerberg bought himself a huge chunk of land for his Hawaii estate. Then he angered everybody by putting up this big, tall wall around it, which actually cut off the ocean breeze for everybody who was living inland. Now, the problem with his 700-acre property is that there are small subplots of land inside it that are owned by Native Hawaiians. It's called the inherited lands. And some have been willing to sell. Most don't. Hawaiians have a deep emotional connection to the land, probably because there's so little of it out here in the middle of the Pacific. But apparently, Zuckerberg is resorting to the courts and suing these Hawaiians in what are called quiet title lawsuits, requesting the forced sales at public auction to the highest bidder. And obviously, he's going to be the highest bidder. And I think one of the reasons I like that George Clooney movie, The Descendants, outside of the fact that I've been to a lot of the places where they filmed it, is it did accurately capture the feeling that most indigenous Hawaiians have toward the land. And they don't want to give it up. And on the other hand, we have, of course, people who are extremely wealthy who simply force their way on in, buy up the entire place, and the indigenous Hawaiians are literally being marginalized in their own country. Because remember, Bill Clinton admitted the Hawaiians never surrendered their sovereignty during the annexation. So the U.S. government's attitude is, we're really sorry. We're not going to give the land back, but we're really sorry. But again, it's another case of lawfare, of using the courts to force people to come to a settlement rather than face bankruptcy. And that's what Zuckerberg is counting on. That faced with these quiet title lawsuits, most of the people who own these lands don't have the resources to hire a lawyer and fight back. And unfortunately, our state government habitually on the side of the very, very rich people. We've got the founder of Oracle literally bought pretty much all of Lanai. That's now a private little realm, if you will. Okay, we're coming up here on another commercial break. We'll be coming back to the last segment of our program today, so please stay tuned. We'll be right back. And aloha America, welcome back to the show here, last segment of our program today. Interesting little story just came across my desk. Apparently, when Japanese leader Shinzo Abe and his wife dined with Benjamin and Sarah Netanyahu at the Prime Minister's residence, it ended on a bad note. Israeli celebrity chef Moshe Segev, the Prime Minister's private chef, capped the elaborate dinner with a selection of chocolates served in a metal shoe. Now, that is a major faux pas. That's highly offensive to the Japanese culture. First of all, that you would put food in a shoe and put the shoe on the table. The Japanese culture is very much anti-shoe. They don't wear shoes into the home. They don't wear shoes into the office place. In fact, Abe himself and the Japanese parliamentarians don't wear shoes in the government buildings. They're always left at the door. And this would be like serving Netanyahu a bunch of chocolates in a dish shaped like a pig. That's how insensitive this was. Now, Abe himself just took it all in stride and didn't respond. But this has created quite a fuss among Japanese social media, and they think it was in complete poor taste, and they're wondering, was this just a case of total insensitivity, or did Netanyahu intend to insult Abe for whatever reasons? Now, over at NASA, they are working on what is called the kilopower reactor. This is an experimental portable nuclear power plant that NASA hopes will one day power permanent settlements on Mars and the moon. Now, we're not talking about a radioisotope thermoelectric generator like we had on Viking or like we have on Curiosity. This is a real fission reactor. The article was illustrated where the cover's off, and you can see what this is being built like. It's called the kilopower reactor. It's about the size of a refrigerator, and it's capable of actually delivering up to 10 kilowatts of energy. This means each kilopower reactor produces enough energy to power about 10 average American homes on Earth. And NASA is estimating that an array of 4 kilopower reactors will be enough to sustain a decent-sized outpost on the moon or Mars for about a decade. So a positive use for nuclear energy. And of course, we're going to get a lot of screaming from people about the risk of launching a nuclear reactor into space. But it has been done before. Now, this probably should have been under the heading of ClimateGate. Government officials in the United Kingdom have partnered with companies and governments in the state of Virginia to literally hack down large swaths of southern hardwood forest in order to create biomass energy for use across the pond. And the issue is that continuing to use fossil fuels like coal won't help Great Britain achieve its greenhouse gas emission reduction target. So the country has decided to clear-cut entire forests here in the United States and burn all the wood that's collected to generate electricity. And they're calling it green energy. Now, those hardwood forests take a long time to grow. So this is not, by any reach of the imagination, sustainable. Okay, there's the music. Time for me to get on out of here and get something useful done with the rest of the day. Please stay tuned for John Stadmiller. I'm sure he's got lots of interesting things to share with you. And please take what you learn here, share it with everyone that you know. Keep talking. You are all technically now part of the independent media. We rely on you to share this information by mouth, by email, by postal letter. Don't waste your time on social media. And we'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.